So we're going to be talking about Tenet, very polarizing, controversial movie. This is, of course, Jason, Gil, and Matt, not necessarily in that order. All went to film school together, all used to live together, all have watched far too many movies together. And as is usually the case, or often the case, looks like we're going to have some perhaps differing opinions about this movie. So take it away.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so and we were talking about
Much in the other direction.
yeah, so and you were talking about when you were watching the movie, you felt like that it was very Nolan-esque, right?
I don't know. I think when I was watching it, at least the first time, I was just trying to keep up.
Yeah, I guess that would be a good entry into the discussion. Like it does feel like I mean, this is like what I told Matt like when I first commented on his review, and I told him that in a way I feel like that the whole movie is one huge ham sandwich. Like it's almost as if Nolan decided to just make the quintessential like Nolan movie, even though I feel like he's been doing that same movie again and again and again with different variations. But I do feel like this one was almost like an exercise, like in the same token as like David Lynch doing what was the one that he did Inland Empire.
Oh, okay.
Like the type of movie that like I mean, he's not late in his career like David Lynch was when he made that, but like it almost feels like after like these directors make a certain movie, they almost like semi apologize for it, or they semi say that it was more
Yeah.
of an exercise. Even Hitchcock, same thing. I think Hitchcock had a
Sure.
late movie. I don't know which one it was, but he also kind of said that it was like an exercise, like a filmmaking exercise versus like
Yeah.
an honest piece of work. So
Or
I'm sure.
not entirely the
Mhm.
same thing, but kind of similar in the way that like Spike Lee talks about Inside Man, since it was a very like commercially successful and very accessible one of his movies. He calls it like his white movie.
Yeah, it's kind of like they give themselves a pass, whether it's because the movie is successful or not,
Whatever
or
the case
just
might be.
different from what they usually do.
Yeah.
They'll call it like I remember Gus Van Sant, didn't he make like a remake of Psycho or something? And they also called
Yeah, he
that
did.
like it was like a film exercise because it was so bad that like it's like a semi
I,
apology.
saying that it was bad is being too generous. I mean, it was an abortion. I mean, it was. I mean, it was shot for shot Psycho, only in color, and you saw Anne Heche's butt crack. I mean, that's literally
Is that bad?
what.
Is Anne Heche's butt crack a bad thing?
I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm just stating a fact.
Okay.
It was just not necessary, is what he's saying. No,
Yeah.
but I get that for sure, that argument, because it's kind of like having a sequel to a movie that's either unnecessary or is not in the spirit of the original. With that Psycho remake, it's a remake, and it loses the whole point of the movie. Like it
Yeah.
was black and white because of the red blood. It was, all these things that it was. I personally feel like, so let me know what you guys think. I personally feel like that this is not it. Like that I believe that this is Nolan just being himself, and he is working within a genre that he was always interested in, because he always wanted to make a Bond movie, so this was kind
Yeah.
of like his version of a Bond
Very
movie,
much
but he
like
can
that.
take it much further than any Bond movie because it's his shtick, like he did with Inception in a
Right.
way. So I do feel like it's just him doing another reiteration of himself, only it's taken to the extreme, and I feel like there's been in the last few movies, and I've been happy about this because ever since Inception and Dark Knight Rises, I felt like he's kind of losing it, like he's doing all these commercial movies for the sake of being commercial, and he's not being adventurous. But then all of a sudden there was Interstellar, pretty
Yeah.
adventurous, and then there was like Dunkirk, very adventurous, especially
Yeah.
the storytelling style. So and even here it felt like he was gonna take a step back, but I feel like he actually took a step forward. So I think he keeps alienating some of his like commercial like
Yeah.
fan base. But I think a lot of people like me and others that got into him because of Memento, because of
Right.
those type of movies, is like, oh, he's back. Like, we didn't lose him to the masses. Like he still wants to make these interesting movies, and he's willing to take that risk. So that's what I think. But let me know what you
Well,
think.
Matt, I know that your overall take would definitely be more or less summed up as negative.
That would be accurate.
What would you say is the gist of your feelings on this, like your argument, perhaps?
Um, I
Did the movie fail?
I in terms of using the metric, did I come out of the movie feeling satisfied in any way, shape, or form? Yes, it failed.
Ah,
I am still monumentally pissed that I didn't get to work IMAX projection on it. I worked IMAX projection on Dunkirk, so I got to watch it, as many times as I wanted, and I did watch it like 5 or 6 times in the theater. In addition to how many times I saw it just from the booth. And I feel like Tenet probably would have been a monumental cinegasm on the IMAX screen, and I finally just gave in and watched it, on my TV because that was where it was.
wait. Hold on. Before you go any further, so the first and perhaps only time that you saw the movie was at home.
Yes.
Do you feel that the colossal letdown of not being able to do Tenet, even though, as some people may not know, you were more or less about to do the IMAX job, as you said, the gig, um, going from that high down to not even seeing it in the theater, how much of your overall negative opinion do you blame on the conditions of your first viewing? Because personally, I feel like that stuff makes a massive impact on me.
Honestly, I would say very little. I, I think that it would have been a better experience, but a bigger screen and seeing 70 millimeter film, projected through a 15,000 watt xenon projector lamp, it doesn't change the fact that the main character is just kind of like not even a character. It doesn't change the fact that the action set pieces, in which is supposed to be kind of an action movie, okay, well, they've got guys, climbing up a skyscraper. Okay, compare that to Mission Impossible Fallout when you've got a 58-year-old actor doing a fucking Halo jump. I mean, it's
right.
just.
All right. Well, okay. So, but like, what else did not work for you?
Wait, but actually, let's pause there for a moment, because it's a good point actually. Just to like keep the back and forth. I do think the fact that you didn't get the projectionist gig for that, it's too bad, because I wonder if your opinion of it, and we'll hear the rest of your take on the specifics, but like if there was ever a movie that you should project and see 5, 6, 7 times in the theater, this was it. Because a lot of people say that like it's the type of movie where even though movies shouldn't be like designed this way, but it's the type of movie that the more you watch it, the more you kind of figure out what's going on there, because it does make sense. It's just that on a first viewing, especially if you don't get with it, it can easily lose you, and I totally understand that, especially because it's a popcorn movie, it's an action movie. So if an action movie is you're not connecting with, it kind of gets like, boring very quickly, because like you said, you've seen so many action sequences that's never gonna dazzle you. So yeah, it's unfortunate that like that didn't happen, and I wonder if that would have benefited. But I'll say I agree that like the screen size doesn't matter. I actually started this on my laptop in the bath, and luckily when I saw the first 40 minutes, and luckily when I told my wife that I was starting it, it's like, no, I wanted to start it, and I was like, oh, but it's an action movie. Yeah, but it's got the whole like time travel thing. So luckily we restarted the movie on the 80-inch projector screen, and that's where I watched it from start to finish. Which again, like I said, I watch so many movies on my laptop for necessity, so I don't think that changed my reaction to it. But I'm glad we did that. But now, we can go on to the.
One thing that I want to make clear is I went into the movie wanting it to be the best movie that I ever saw.
Sure.
I mean, I wanted to be, I wanted it to be this thing that I could just say, you know what, Fauci, fuck you, you took this away from me.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be that, and it just wasn't that. And I was trying to make it that throughout the entire viewing process. I wanted to like see Kenneth Branagh and think like, geez, this is like him being the best bad guy that he's been since Iago in the Othello adaptation. Yeah. I wanted it to be, this. I wanted it to be better than Inception, at least, and I don't think it's better than Inception.
It certainly makes less sense than Inception.
Yeah, I mean, well, and one thing that I brought up in my review is that Christopher Nolan has been making movies for over 20 years now. Most of them still involve guns, and he still doesn't know how guns work. Somehow, and that baffles me.
But about the beginning where they're trying to explain the rules.
Huh? Yeah.
I don't think in a movie where things are moving backwards you can really, like fault that.
Yeah, that's a good point, and maybe that's a good segue to like to get deeper into that stuff, to like the differences, because like we said, it's like we said in the beginning, I felt like it was one big ham sandwich, and let's face it, a lot of like stuff in his movies, I don't think any of his movies are like flawless. Even The Dark Knight, like I've pointed out many times, there's like flaws in the plot and everything, but it works so like well. It's why the Hitchcock came up with that, because it works so well in the moment, as to like suspend your belief enough to enjoy the ride, because certain things, especially time travel, is almost unsolvable. Like it's almost impossible to get it right if you want to make it as exciting or as cutting edge as possible. That you have to like have the logic not make sense, and if you want, we can get to that in the end, like what doesn't make sense here, but it's actually pretty simple, but let's go back to that. So you said like the character wasn't interesting, right? That was a big thing story wise. And then the set pieces were not amazing. Like, I mean, there's some cool stuff in there, like it's kind of cool. It's kind of reminds me of, like, I don't know if it was Snatch or Lock, Stock and Two Barrels, the sequence with the car, like on the freeway, when he ends up colliding with his past or with his future. That was pretty cool. That reminded me of like I think it was in Snatch. There was like that whole thing where like there's two timelines, and the milk spilling on the windshield of the car.
like collide together in that one
They
moment?
collide together, but they come from two different timelines. So you see the milk spill, but then you see it again later. It's kind of cool. So he did that with the
Oh
freeway
yeah,
sequence.
when you're talking about timelines, you're saying like the way it was edited together in that movie.
It was edited together as if those two things are colliding. So,
Yeah.
you know, Nolan did that in the freeway sequence, which was kind of cool. It was kind of nifty, but obviously that doesn't make or break a movie. So there's some fun stuff there that you wouldn't see in in a Mission Impossible movie per se. But I agree that, like, to me personally, and I'm sure you know this, like, as I've gotten older, like, I'm less and less interested in action. It's really like mostly story that interests me. With all the you know, because there's no limit to what action can be done nowadays, and even if there's like some fancy things Tom Cruise does, that's cool. But I really, without a story, I'm not gonna go see stunts. Like, if I want to go see
Yeah.
stunts, I don't need to go see a movie. I'll just go to like a circus,
Right.
or you know.
So
Um,
along the
Yeah.
same lines of what you're talking about right there, personally, I felt like numerous moments throughout this movie were really spectacular. Several of the heist type things that they were doing were done really, really well. But I will agree that, well, I don't think I'd go as far as to say what Matt says in that his character didn't really have a character or personality of any kind or whatever. I feel like what was there was fairly subtle, and we didn't have enough, in my opinion, in the first, let's say, third of the movie or so, to really like get to know him, because everything's happening so fast and moving from one set piece to the next so quickly. I feel like, and maybe this would have unraveled the whole thing, and maybe it would have made the whole thing suck. I don't know, but something about the first 4 or 5 scenes, everything through the opera house scene and through to the stuff where he gets in that car and drives and gets to the exposition scene where they're shooting the bullets and everything. All the way through that stuff, I feel like if there wasn't so much going on in the movie, there would have been time to show us something, just some sort of couple of scenes that would have given us a little bit more backstory to his motivation and like a little bit more backstory to like what kind of a person he was, how the hell he ended up with this organization that's like, you know, doing these weird things, you know, and I don't need like a full on origin story or anything crazy like that, but just I feel like there's something that would have benefited the movie if and like you said, you know, you're talking about the action scenes. It's like every good action scene is made better when you care about the character, and I did care about him. I do agree with some of what Matt's saying about it's thin, you know, like there's so much going on. And I feel this is the same way with Kenneth Branagh's character. I feel like he's a very, you know, simple villain with an understandable motivation, but a simple motivation. And I think the reason for that is it's such a complicated movie that it was probably a choice. It was probably like, let's not get too crazy with this because we already are asking the audience to endure so much, you know?
The simplest and most concise criticism of the movie, I think, is just stating the simple fact that the main character is actually named protagonist. I mean, like, I mean, you look up the IMDb page. You know, I mean, he says in the movie, "I'm the protagonist." He has
Protagonist.
the line in the movie, "I'm the protagonist." And
Yeah.
all I could think of from then on was, you know, Red Letter Media or whatever the hell it is. You know, there's this thing called a protagonist, and yeah, that's all I could think of. That's, I mean, he's a cardboard cutout of a human being.
Yeah,
Granted, a good-looking one. I mean,
no,
you
but
know, like,
that's
but,
I think that's a very good way to enter that like where that comes from, because I think in one of my posts I mentioned that, or comments. Um, So I've been like, I've been doing a lot of meditation in recent years, the Sam Harris app thing, and also like listening to a lot of talks about consciousness and everything. And it's funny because today I was listening to one about like something with like he was talking to like a neuroscientist that he's worked with in the past, and they're talking about the brain, and it's funny because they relate to when they talk about consciousness and the self and all these things, like the things that make up who you are, they often refer to it as that you're the protagonist of your life. So my argument is that this movie is is basically about the nature of consciousness. Like, and that's why he's a like cardboard cutout. Like, not really. It's also because he's a special agent, and special agents tend to be like, it's they're not James Bond. Like in reality, they're actually like, they're very solitude because they have to be, or they have to like hide their identity so their family is not like in danger. They're very like, you don't know much about them, and yes, it could be partially Jason's argument. I agree that like simplifying the characters helps you see the what is it, the tree for the forest, like
Yeah.
the forest for the trees. So it's kind of like it simplifies, because then you just, if you look back and just see the structure, like what this whole movie is trying to do, and it's hinting at it with the name of the lead character, is that it's it's exploring the concept of consciousness of everybody in it, specifically the protagonist, but also the a consciousness of the bad guy or the foil, like the woman. Like everybody has their needs and wants. They're very thin, but that's really all you need if we're talking about like archetypes, and if we're talking
Yeah.
about things that are supposed to be like, don't focus on them too much. It's kind of like Dunkirk, only not exactly, and it's kind of like Memento, only not exactly. It's a combination of the two. Like Memento, you can't really relate to it moment to moment because it's too confusing, but it's supposed to be that way because he's putting you in his shoes.
Like
He's
an
confused
experience.
himself. He doesn't know what's going on. He's
Yeah.
going along with things.
Quick
Um,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
Matt, what is there, have you read something, or is there something in the movie that I missed? Like, um, why are you pronouncing the character name the way that you did? I mean, I'm really bad at spelling, but while we're sitting here talking about this, I looked it up, and it looks like it's just spelled protagonist. Is there a specific reason why you were saying it the way you did?
Protagonist? Yeah, it's just a reference to Red Letter Media.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make
But
sure that I wasn't like missing something. Okay.
yeah, no, they're
Protagonist. I thought he was
yeah,
just making a joke. Yeah.
yeah, no, it was in response to the Star Wars prequels. There used to be this thing called in story
Yeah.
called a protagonist, and so
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
and so forth. But
No, I just wasn't sure if you were referencing something or if there was just something in the actual movie that I just like
yeah,
totally.
yeah, no, I was just referencing something. So okay, I actually think that there's a point to be made here, though, which is okay. Here's why look. Dunkirk doesn't have any characters with any memorable names. I mean, I don't even know if any characters in Dunkirk actually had names.
Right.
Between seeing it in theaters, seeing it from the booth, and watching it at home, I've probably seen it like 50 times. I still can't name a single character in that movie. But the thing is, Dunkirk, and I said this when Dunkirk came out. I said it while I was still working projection on it. Dunkirk went full Soviet movie
Right.
in the way that it was presented. You weren't supposed to latch on to any one character. It was a movie about one nation against another. It was a movie about one nation's accomplishment.
Yeah.
It was a story of collective accomplishment. You weren't and every character in that movie was supposed to be a bit of an archetype. It was supposed to be,
Yeah.
something that just represents something bigger. And he went full bore with that in Dunkirk.
Yeah.
And then you compare that with Memento, where which I think is more relevant to Tenet, where Leonard Shelby, like, you're supposed to kind of be looking at the world through his own brain, and so it is confusing. So it is hard to kind of interpret things moment to moment. But you still get a sense of who Leonard Shelby is.
Yeah.
So there is a vicarious aspect to Memento
That
I think,
perhaps missing.
right, that I think is lacking in Tenet. I can't live vicariously through protagonist in Tenet because I don't know who he is. I don't know why he's doing anything that he's doing. I have no sense of his being outside of, well, there's this looming threat, and he's trying to vanquish it. I mean, yeah, yeah, if somebody's trying to destroy the world, yeah, I mean, anybody would want to stop that if you could, but that doesn't really tell me about him as a human being.
Well, if I could, I was going to say, because this is fresh in my mind, because like I said, I just watched the first 30 minutes. In that first conversation he has with the guy who he says Tenet for the first time on the boat,
Yeah.
I think in their eyes, they were using that whole first scene and that conversation and the setup and everything to say, this is the kind of person he is, because many people have been through what he was through and didn't die. They didn't die for the cause, and they didn't do whatever. So we're supposed to, from that point on, go, this guy is that dedicated. He's that whatever. But my problem isn't the manner in which they did all that. I just feel like maybe it would have been better if we had something before that to show me why he's that dedicated.
Oh, why he is the way that he is. No, but I
say a lot of people wouldn't have made it as far as you just did. You're like one of few, and like, yeah, why? I mean, give me something from his childhood that made him that gave him such resolve. Something, I don't know. I don't even know. Something.
I mean, I would basically say that for such a visual genius that Christopher Nolan is, there's a lot more say it and take it as truth because I said it, rather than showing it in this movie.
Yeah.
By comparison to his previous works.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, like, I think that he the reason why they selected him is because he was willing to sacrifice himself. He was willing to die for the mission. And that was the kind of mission that he was in, where emotion couldn't be involved in the process. Kind of like, why did they choose Brad Pitt for, like Ad Astra, is because he can, like, his pulse doesn't go above a certain, like, thing, because he's always, like, very, like, stoic, very like level-headed. So he's good for that mission. I think that's what's going on here. It's just that Ad Astra was all about his personality and his relationship to his father and everything. But this movie is about something different. It's like they needed a specific type of person because they needed someone who just goes along with things. And to relate it to another movie is No Country for Old Men. I recently rewatched it, and again, going back to the whole meditation and consciousness thing, it's the whole argument for, like, no free will. Like, No Country for Old Men and Tenet, for that matter, are two movies that are very strongly of the opinion that things happen to us. We don't make things happen. We just react to them. And it's only within our capabilities and our DNA, whatever the universe put into us, that we're capable of providing the right reactions to survive another day. And he was just the human with the correct algorithm to make it work, at least as far as their calculations. And that's what it was. And then the rest of it, why we didn't get too much into it, into his childhood and everything, why? Because maybe it doesn't matter, because all it is, do we get into like the characters in No Country for Old Men's childhood? No, it doesn't matter, because it's all moment to moment showing like.
That was just an example I was using. I mean,
Oh yeah.
For old men, we get a lot of character development.
Not that much. When you think about it, they're very, very simple motivation. One is trying to create order, to like, keep the order. One is just trying to survive. Like, he sees a bag of money, he just grabs it. He doesn't know why. He knows it's the wrong thing to do. He knows he's gonna screw up his life by grabbing that bag, but he just does it. He doesn't even know. He can't explain it. You see him thinking that it's a stupid idea, but he still does it. And then one is just like, programmed to have an honor code. So they're basically three automatons, each doing their own thing, and at the mercy of the universe and consequences that are beyond their control. So I really feel like Tenet is kind of the same thing, only on steroids, because it's got the whole, but essentially what it is, it's a movie about your future self selecting yourself for a mission, which is technically impossible time travel wise. But basically what happens in the movie is that the future self of the protagonist, who's a time travel expert at that point in time, selects himself because he knows he's the best person for the mission, and he knows himself better than anyone else, so he can influence, he can TikTok like this the sequence of events by implanting one of his agents, what's his face,
Robert Pattinson.
If he implants him in the right moments along the way to help himself to get where he needs to go, he's basically re-engineering the past to make it work, to avoid the disaster that can come from this technology and whatever. So that's essentially what the movie is about. And it's kind of brilliant. It's kind of amazing, but it ultimately, it's not pointless. It's not just action for the sake of action and cleverness for the sake of cleverness. It's saying something about like, what is the essence of the self? Like, what does it mean to be a human being, a protagonist of your own mind? Are you in control? Are you at the wheel, or is someone else? That's like, in this specific case, his future self was at the wheel, but not in the movie, not in the movie world. Most of us are just basically governed by things that are outside of our control, whether it's the universe or DNA, and we're just going along with it. And Tenet is kind of like a cool representation of that, while using the whole like cleverness of like time travel and all that. But that's essentially what the movie is about. And that's why I liked it a lot. I don't think it's as good as, say, like No Country for Old Men or some of these other movies that talk about Memento, for example, that illustrate, like, put you in the shoes of the character. They're not super relatable necessarily, but at the end of the thing, like Mulholland Drive is another one of those, like 2001: A Space Odyssey is another one of those. You have characters that you don't really relate to, you don't even like that much. But at the end of the movie, if you go back and you put all the pieces together, you're like, wow, this is kind of brilliant. Like, if you look at it as one big structure, it actually really comes all together really nicely, in spite of the flaws that seemed like flaws at the time, but maybe, like we said, maybe intentionally they're there to help that but to help us perceive the structure more and focus less on character, just like he did with Dunkirk, he did here. But just not, it's not that you're supposed to not follow him. You are mostly following the protagonist's journey, but he's supposed to be pretty simple of a character enough so you can just plop your eyes into his eyes, like you're seeing things through him. You're not supposed to see him, you're supposed to see what's going on, because you're in his shoes. You're not trying to relate to him, you're trying to relate to the action. So that's why he's that simple of a character. But I'll concede that if you don't understand that that's what's going on, that that's the gist of the movie, then you're completely off the rails, and you've never gotten on, and it's just not going to happen. So I totally understand why it's a polarizing movie.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I understand your perspective. I still think that it's one of those things where, like, I'm just having a flashback to film school when somebody, screened a really, like, bad movie, and somebody just asked them, like, well, why is the lighting so flat? And oh, well, that was intentional. As well, yeah, it might be intentional. That doesn't make it right. you know, uh, and you know, and again, Dunkirk is not a really good comparison because, again, you take Harry Styles' character in Dunkirk or something, and if you tried to make Dunkirk and say, okay, well, we're going to take Harry Styles' character and tell the entire movie through his eyes, it's a shit movie. Like
oh, it'll be an okay movie. It just wouldn't be Dunkirk, but it would
right,
be a decent movie.
It wouldn't be a very good movie,
Yeah.
because it's a very thin character. Dunkirk worked because it was an ensemble. No Country worked because it was an ensemble. And even with No Country, I mean, I was thinking, while you were talking, there's that scene in No Country where, Ed Tom was asked, like, oh, well, the DEA or whatever, is going out to the, the scene of the shootout again. They wanted to know if you would go with them. And Ed Tom is just like, did any new bodies accumulate out there? No. Well, then I guess I can skip it. And just in that brief line of dialogue, Ed Tom becomes a more complete character than Protagonist ever was. I mean, even with there being this theme that I think you're correct about, Gil, of a lack of free will, of we're basically responding to stimuli that's happening around us on a regular basis, and just trying to survive, and so much of how we do things are just impulses in our brain. Still, like, those impulses in our brain are attitudes, even if they are all prior causes, which I do believe that they are. That's still character building, and I think that's something that Tenet ultimately lacked overall in its main character. I mean, you get who Ed Tom is as a human being, even if he doesn't have any free will, even if he's just navigating whatever's happening to him outside of his control. You still get who he is.
Well, okay. Aside from the characters, being developed as much or as little as they were, I know that's what you started with, Matt. Mentioning that was like kind of like a quintessential way of wrapping it all up. Were there other major things that maybe perhaps like were problematic for you?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that there were, like, really moments.
Aspects.
There were a few moments that bothered me. I mean, again, I actually do think that scene, where they're demonstrating, the bullet, going back into the gun and everything, actually would have been more powerful if they had done something with her, like, popping it out of the chamber rather than showing it back in the clip, which is not how guns work. But I mean, I think that actually there was actually a missed opportunity there. But I mean, that's just nitpicking, one thing. But I mean, my general criticism of the movie, overall, regardless of character, and well, that's the thing, I can even say regardless of character, because character is kind of important. But regardless of all that, it's just, well, I think that it's a movie that valued theme over story. And it's weird because I'm usually somebody who's really into looking into the underlying themes, looking into the underlying ideas. I mean, one of my favorite things about a movie like Minority Report is that it deals with issues of free will and, the ethics of, is it okay to maybe make the mistake once or twice of throwing somebody in prison who might have turned out to be innocent if you can just get rid of murder entirely. Like, there are ethical ideas implanted in, movies like Minority Report that I find fascinating. But the thing is, with Minority Report, it was able to deal with those thematic ideas. It was able to deal with those ethical ideas without sacrificing the story. And I think that Tenet decided to go full philosophy on us at the cost of actually just telling a good story.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree. Like, I think based on the reaction that people had, and of course, like time will tell, because like 2001, for example, was like completely like just lambasted, like, and everybody was very critical when it came out, like the most boring movie ever made, blah blah blah. And then 10, 20 years later, it's like, best sci-fi, best movie ever, like.
It is very boring though.
It is boring. Like, I'll admit it. Like, it's basically a very slow movie, but it's intentional. Like, it's the idea of the movie. But again, it's the same. This is the question. Like, for Mulholland Drive, for example, like, we had this discussion in film school. Like, if you watch that movie, it's kind of slow, and the story is kind of cliche. It's the basic story of Hollywood story, like of wanting to come and make it big in Hollywood. But it takes that story and flips it on its head. Like, it has two timelines, and it's got a dream sequence, a huge, like, 2/3 of the movie is basically a dream sequence that is out of order. And when you, much like 2001, once you break off those 5, 6 sections and you understand what each of them represent and how they connect, 2001 is simpler than Mulholland Drive because it's in sequence, so it's not as confusing. It's just so episodic that, like, you have to, and there's nothing connecting the dots for you. You have to connect it yourself, which is what I think every good movie should be. Yeah, so those are like two examples of movies that, like, really you have to, like, connect those dots. But once you connect them, it's infinitely satisfying. Like, it's, to me, it's more satisfying than most movies. I mean, like, those two movies are like top 10 movies for me. But I'll concede Tenet is not a top 10 movie. It's not even a top 30 movie. It's, if I put it in that category, it's only because I think it attempts to do something in that spirit. But yes, not with as good of a story, not with more flaws to its logic, and like I said, like, character that might be lacking, even if it was on purpose. There's characters that were lacking. The characters in 2001 are not interesting. Hal is the most interesting character in the movie, but again, that's on purpose. So
Yeah.
I don't know, like, what's maybe in Tenet, even though it was on purpose, was it the wrong call? Like, would the movie have been better or less polarizing? Or maybe it will succeed. Like in 10, 20 years, it'll be lauded as like one of his best movies. I don't know, but at the moment, I would put it as one of his best movies. Like I think it's like top 5 for Nolan. But yes, it's not close to like, you know, like top 20, 30 like best movies of all time. But I just mostly I applaud him attempting this. You know, like there's like Aronofsky tried to do it with like The Fountain and like gloriously crushed, like just like, you know, smashed into the ceiling. Like he it just failed miserably. Like it's an admirable movie, and it's got some like really good things about it. It looks really nice and the music is amazing, but the story and characters are just like you have to hold your nose up, and it's too bad because there is like some really cool concepts in there, but
Yeah.
but it just falls flat to me personally. So the fact that Nolan pulled like an Aronofsky and a Kubrick and a Lynch and didn't completely spectacularly fail, not as bad as The Fountain, then I give him credit for that. I think that's where I would end my, you know, my take on the movie, is that the fact that it holds up in any possible way to some people is a success.
Matt.
Yeah, and
Wait, wait, wait.
I would agree with that. Sorry, sorry, Jason, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, first off, which do you prefer, Tenet or The Fountain?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, Tenet.
Okay. And wow, he sounded so disappointed.
I thought he was gonna go for The Fountain. I mean, you know, it's the music and the visuals are very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Fountain looked better. The Fountain
Yeah.
definitely looked better than Tenet.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'll never get over that soap opera moment where, hey, Hugh Jackman, it turns out that you just discovered the cure for your wife's disease. Oh shit, your wife just dies 3 seconds later. I mean, and the slow motion shot and all that. I mean, it's just such bullshit. It's awful. I mean, the movie looks so good and it sounds so good, and there's so much that should have gone better in every way that wasn't technical about The Fountain.
coming off the heels of Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing with Aronofsky. He makes great shit, great shit,
But we didn't know that
shit.
at the time.
Yeah.
For all we knew, it was just going to always be great.
Yeah. But every third movie is going to be awful.
Okay, so Matt,
Yeah.
Gil said somewhere in the top 5. Where do you put Tenet in Christopher Nolan's ranked filmography?
Well, let's see.
You don't have, it doesn't have to be an exact location. Just kind of give us a general idea.
I would put every Batman. I would put both Batman Begins and The Dark Knight ahead of it. I wouldn't put Dark Knight Rises ahead of it. Memento is definitely ahead of it. Dunkirk is ahead of it. Inception is ahead of it. And I didn't like Inception all that much. Insomnia is ahead of it.
Wow.
Following is ahead of it.
So now we need to count. Is it like a top 10 or it's out of the top 10? How many movies did he make? I think he's only made like 11 or 12.
Yeah.
I guess bottom line is pretty low.
Okay.
Bottom third.
I'm pretty much in line with that, I'd say. Like, not because I disliked the movie that much, just I like his other movies so much more.
I mean, he's a great filmmaker. There's no way around it.
I know that.
But, you know,
I would say that the Dark Knight Rises and I really like Insomnia, but I don't think I liked it as much. I think there's redeeming qualities of Tenet that put it a little higher for me, and I'd put it in near the same place you did, because I mean I do think The Following and Interstellar and the first two Batman movies and Memento, that's five right there. I would say all five of those are better in my opinion.
Yeah. It's just Following. The Following is that TV series with Kevin Bacon.
I always,
Yeah,
yeah.
but actually, I have to kind of bring this up though, like Gil bringing up 2001, A Space Odyssey. I couldn't help but also connect to the Tree of Life. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, that's close.
yeah.
That's also in that category.
Yeah, I mean, and you both know that I'm a huge Terrence Malick fan, but and I am stealing this from somebody. I think that it's somebody that we went to college with. I just don't remember who specifically it was. But after To the Wonder came out, he just kind of said, watching a Terrence Malick movie is like getting stranded in a forest with a bunch of people. The scenery is beautiful, and you always leave with fewer people than you came in with.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really refute most of what Gil was saying about Tenet, but insofar as the reality of objective reality, I guess there's just fundamentally a right way to do a movie with really boring characters or really thin characters and a kind of prodding, methodical pace and still do it right. And the way to do that, I think, is the way Kubrick did it in 2001, the way Terrence Malick has done it in movies like The Tree of Life or Thin Red Line or The New World. To a lesser extent, Days of Heaven. I mean, Days of Heaven was only like 90 minutes, so you didn't have to sit in the theater for that long. But I mean, it just seems like those movies are successful because they create this experience of, instead of the movie stimulating you by fast cuts, spectacle, quips, basically being the anti J.J. Abrams. These are the movies that are the anti J.J. Abrams. They just wash over you. You feel like you're in a wave pool of cinema when you're watching these things. It's gentle and it's beautiful, and you're just letting it happen. You're just letting the experience, permeate through you. And that's what Terrence Malick does well. That's what Kubrick did well. And
I mean, one thing is Terrence Malick doesn't always succeed. Like, he succeeds to one degree or another depending on the movie.
Yeah.
So it's not as if he always gets it right. Like I think only half his movies get it right. So it's tough. It's not easy to pull off.
Right. Yeah. He's not as consistent as Stanley Kubrick. I mean, if I'm drunk and tired, I could turn on Barry Lyndon and sit and watch that 3-hour movie and stay awake. And I have no idea how I could do that, because it is not the most entertaining movie ever. It's just a movie that washes over you.
It's very deliberate. Yeah, it's very thought. It's really a thought through. But I'll let you finish your point before. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, Tenet never actually made the attempt to be a 2001 or A Tree of Life or uh, a New World, or the New World, or anything like that. I mean, and I think that's the thing. Like I think that usually movies succeed best when they just say, "Screw it, we're going to go full bore on this." Like this is going to be this is going to be a methodical, deliberate, slow movie, or this is
We're
going
gonna
to be
go full Tarkovsky.
this is going to be a movie that frustrates you to no end. In terms of the crazy stuff that we're throwing at you from minute to minute, like Mother or something, or Requiem for a Dream. Like go full bore with it. And Tenet seemed to be Christopher Nolan's deviation from that, in that he didn't seem to go full bore with anything.
See,
You know, it,
I do wonder, because everything, as I'm listening to you saying all that stuff, every single line to me describes Tenet. Like it's from my perspective, and I totally understand that we agree on that we disagree on this, and I also understand why, because like we said, that if you don't get on the rails, you're never there with it. Um, like to me, that's what that movie is. It's just that Nolan decided to package it in an action movie because that's his shtick. Like that's what he does. But ultimately, it's essentially, it is a Tree of Life. It is like a 2001. It's just that it's packaged in a spy movie that just throws so much at you that's really captivating if you're on the ride with it. But if you never get on, then it's just a dumb popcorn movie. Like it's the equivalent of watching a horrible action movie. Because if you never get on the ride, like if you never like are going along with what's going on there, you're just lost. Like the more you're not with it, the more you're lost, because it's such a confusing movie that you cannot, like, if it's the kind of, let's say, it's, for one thing, it's the kind of movie that you cannot go pee and come back. Like it's
No,
just,
no,
there's
not at
no
all.
place
yeah,
to do that.
no,
It's,
absolutely.
yeah, so it's and again, I'm not like, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with people that have like, that don't get off the on the ride. I do think that he could have done better, to have that on ramp be slightly easier. Maybe not as like, not throwing you into it, like, but maybe like building into it. And maybe the device, the using the time travel, like rewind device, maybe that was throwing a bit too confusing of a thing. But I think that was the whole point of the movie. Like without that, you don't have a Tenet. um
Let me like throw something out here real quick. Is it possible that all along from the beginning, Christopher Nolan's intention was to try and make a movie that would be kind of like the perfect movie? To make a movie that gives you that movie going experience that Matt was trying to describe, where the Terrence Malick, what was it, Tree of Life or whatever movie experience, the 2001 whatever, where you leave the theater feeling like something washed over you. The catharsis is so real, and the concept is so high that you're like thinking about the movie for days afterward, and it's like affected you in some crazy way. you know um the kind of stuff that you might say he succeeded with in some movies and not so much some of the others. But maybe he was trying to go for something that substantial and that heady, and create a movie that is not particularly easy, to grasp, but that you feel that much more, accomplished when you do, make it through the whole thing. And yet at the same time, pack it with so much spectacle and so much eye popping, like wow, awesomeness, and this crazy sci fi concept, um, that it would just be, you know, accessible to mainstream audiences, even if they weren't quite getting what he was going for. But then in trying to do that, maybe maybe the end result, I would say, just from my thoughts, having listened to both of you, maybe he didn't quite get the substance that he was going for, or if he got it, maybe he didn't get to really delve into that concept as freely as he would have if he had made a slow, methodically paced film about it that focused more on that. And maybe the spectacle suffered a bit on the other side because there was so much in the movie and we just didn't quite get those moments that would have humanized the characters a little more and made them a little, you know, made us care a little bit more about what was happening, and, you know, just little things like that. You know, maybe both sides of what he was trying to achieve didn't quite work out as well as he would have liked, or as well as we would have liked, but maybe that's what he was going for, was to try and create that you know, crazy, you know, middle ground or something like that.
Yeah, no, I think he ultimately was trying to do the Nolan version of an art house movie, like the Nolan version of a 2001, A Tree of Life, Mulholland Drive. Like he was trying to it's like, I'm the action guy. I'm like the big blockbuster movie guy. But I really want to make this high concept thing about like the nature of consciousness, the nature of time. The time is fluid, consciousness is fluid, the self is an illusion. Like all these like high concepts that he even touched on a little bit, like, you know, in Interstellar with like time
Yeah.
and realities, fifth dimensions, fourth dimension, whatever that was, which was also didn't really work, but it's fine. It was still like a better movie, I would say, than
Agreed.
Tenet. But it worked better moment to moment. But yes, like maybe Kubrick, and even Kubrick is debatable because, you know, as we hear Jason, like Barry Lyndon and 2001, he doesn't find that nearly as interesting as we do.
Hold on. Just for clarity, in case anybody ever listens to this, let me just say, I really enjoy Barry Lyndon
Oh
and
yeah.
2001. I appreciate the movies a lot, but unlike Matt, I could not watch either one of those movies if I was tired.
Oh yeah, totally. And the funny thing is, when I
Yeah.
was a kid, I couldn't sit through 2001 and not fall asleep. Now I can. One time I watched in the theater and I drank a bit and I did fall asleep, but that was just the alcohol. It's not. I should get a high to watch 2001, and I'll do that soon. But to drink when you watch it, that's not helpful. But it was just a bad experiment. But because it was a midnight screening too, which is a terrible idea. So in any case, yeah. So and we totally get it. And this is ultimately what this is about. It's like all these movies that Matt was saying that you're supposed to let them wash over you. They're not as engaging as other movies. They're very similar to like a lot of foreign films play that game where they're not about trying to engage with you. You have to engage with them. You have to decipher their grammar and then their language, because they're not going to give you the generic grammar and language of a generic Hollywood movie, because that's boring, because that's been done so many times. Let's try something different. And that's what, you know, the Kubricks of the world, you know, the Terrence Malick and some of these other people, Aronofsky, and sometimes they fail. So, and this is, I think, the point that we ultimately agree on, is that Tenet is a success in some ways in some people's eyes, but it's a failure in other ways. Like, it's even a failure to me, because if it was a success, then it would probably be his best movie. If I was putting it in the same category as 2001 and Mulholland Drive, because to me those two movies are their respective directors' best movies. So it's definitely not a slam dunk. Um, Probably for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like, probably there were some tweaks that he could have done that could have made it better, and who knows, he might have done other tweaks that made it like, you know, his the Fountain. Like, it could have been that bad. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think ultimately, I think we generally agree that it's not a slam dunk, but it's just that I personally admired the attempt so much that I hold it in a higher regard. Which there is something kind of um there's a it's a bit of bullshit. I accept that like I am forgiving the movie more than I maybe should, for some reason, because I had a strong connection to like what it was attempting to do. but I gotta say, like, when the movie was over, like, me and my wife were like talking for like a long time. Like, it was like a lot to talk about. It was really interesting. And when a movie does that, you got to give it some props, even if it wasn't moment to moment like as exciting as, like, the Dark Knight or even Inception, even though I don't like it as much. But even if it's not as exciting moment to moment, the fact that it made you like, look what we're doing now, even though we're debating it, not so much like, talking about like we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about what was involved there.
That's
There's more to it, of course, but like, but there's a lot there. Like, it's admirable. But yeah, but ultimately it's probably gonna fall where it's supposed to fall. Like, not a slam dunk, but some people appreciate it. Some people maybe on a second and third rewatch, like, will appreciate it more, but still will never consider it like a top five or like one of the best movies. For those reasons, probably for those reasons. Like, if you had those reactions, and then there's probably a reason for that. But yeah, it's just admirable. I'm glad he made it. I'm just glad he went in that direction and not
Yeah.
like, and he didn't regress in any way, even though it's regressing as far as success. But to me, it's like progressing as far as like being an adventurous filmmaker.
And this really is where we do agree, especially with the abortions of movies that we've seen, like, the remake of Mulan, the Rise of Skywalker, just like, well, basically everything from Disney. Uh, and that's why I wanted. That is part of the reason why I wanted to love this movie. It is because it's a $200 million movie. That's an original screenplay. That's an original idea. That it's not coming from source material. It's not a remake. It's not rehashing old bullshit from others, from something else.
Yeah.
Like, he took a risk, and I laud him for that. I will laud him to my dying day for that. I think that it is wonderful that this movie exists. And there should be more movies like this. I wish there were more movies like this. I wish that there were more people taking these risks and given the opportunity to take these risks. The movie just fell short for me in a lot of ways. And I mean, I love almost everybody involved. I mean, like, even Robert Pattinson. I mean, like, I thought that he was just a brain dead pretty boy for years, and then he was in Good Time and The Lighthouse, and now he's in this, and holy crap, that guy can act. Like, he's really good. Hoyt van Hoytma, he's really good. I mean, Wally Pfister has to be kicking himself in the ass for retiring. For deciding, oh, you know what, I'm not going to be a DP anymore. I'm going to direct this really crappy movie with Johnny Depp, and just kind of fall into the shadows. I mean,
I also really even though he's in the movie for like 4 minutes and stuff, I really liked Aaron Taylor Johnson at the end.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know it's not going to happen, but considering that Nolan so badly wants to make a James Bond movie, if Daniel Craig ever finally decides to actually retire like he keeps threatening to every time he makes a movie, like, I would love for them to just give Christopher Nolan the reins and let him use Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's the perfect age for it, and this was the first movie I'd ever seen him in actually speaking a British accent.
Yeah. I'd be all for that. I mean, it would definitely be better than just making the next Bond, a black woman. I mean,
I still haven't seen. None of us have seen that movie yet, but I still think that's. I don't think that they're trying to like Well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I didn't look in the trailers. To me, like that was the direction they were taking, like a spin-off thing and making a whole series of stuff with her. But who knows? Maybe we'll.
Yeah,
That's
I'm not getting that impression either. It just seems like they're trying to castrate Bond, but
I don't know. We're all speculating at this point.
but I mean that's a digression and discussion for another.
Yeah, but the
So
one thing I will say, that like maybe it's a good place to wrap it up, is that like the one thing I will say is that the type of hate that I think Tenet gets online, that I think is unwarranted, is like that people who didn't like it or didn't get it have this like notion that like anybody who got any percentage of what was going on in that movie and even liked it remotely is just like, full of himself, like he is like,
Right.
that the
yeah,
movie like doesn't make sense at all. Like the movie is actually fairly simple. Like I'm sure there's more to it, and I'm sure I didn't catch all of it because I just saw it once. But I really feel like movies should be made that if you're an avid movie watcher, you should be able to watch it once and get the gist of it, even if you don't get all of it. And
Sure.
I think I got the gist of it and I was satisfied, and I'm sure on a rewatch I'll get more of it. But it's it's not that complicated. It really isn't. It's just moment to moment as you're being exposed to this world. Like
Yeah.
2001 is kindergarten storytelling. Like once you watch it like a second and third time, you're like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, why didn't I get this the first time?
yeah,
Like Woody Allen like famously said like that he watched it and hated it, and then every time he watched it again and again, he loved it more and more, and he realized like this was the first time in his life that the filmmaker who was making the movie was so far ahead of him, like so like in a different like time and space with his storytelling skills, that like he was humbled, like he was just, you know so, which is crazy because like that movie is so simple. So it's amazing how something as simple as what's going on in Tenet or Mulholland Drive, like any of the movies that we brought up, it's so simple. It's just that like when you first watch them, it could be deceivingly complex, you know?
Um,
yeah,
along those lines, I will say this because I do think that's a good area to kind of like come to an end with. But in talking about how simple it is and how people have a problem with it and everything, I would say that one of my biggest issues with the movie really was the on a base level. Forget about the story because I agree with you that if you really try, it is pretty simple and you can kind of like piece it together. But when you're making a movie with stuff that is larger than life and science fiction especially and stuff like that, you got to have rules. And he definitely, there's problems with Inception, but he explained the rules pretty well in
mm,
Inception. Interstellar has some weird stuff at the end, but it all makes sense. I mean, I don't really think it would work that way, but at least it seems to make sense within the framework of the movie, at least, you know. And there's a few things that are kind of stupid in that movie too, but it's like it pretty much makes sense. When it comes to the rules of this inverting stuff, um, they do not even try to explain it nearly as well as those two movies or plenty of other movies that have some weird stuff in them.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a discussion. I saw one thing. I was looking it up like before we spoke, and oh no, it wasn't even. It was just randomly on Facebook. There was like a comment section, but somebody said like, why does she not have a mask when she goes back, when she inverts in time to kill the Kenneth Branagh character? And you know what? I kind of don't know. Like, I'm sure that if I looked it up and I'll get the counter argument, I'm sure that there is some logic. Like, there's no way the whole climax of the movie is her going back in time to kill him before he's able to, like, set off this weapon or whatever. So there's got to be some logic why she doesn't need
Oh,
a mask.
I could be wrong, but I think I know what you're talking about. You're talking about at the end where the regular her is on the boat and then she's there talking to him, having that conversation.
Yeah, because if you're
So
inverted, you always need a mask.
okay, so
mm,
the reason behind that is because you don't you can you can travel backward in time by inverting yourself, and
then you can start moving forward, right?
Start moving forward, you're back to breathing regular air again. So
Yeah.
So in other words, the story is that you remember that boat they were in that had that little sealed chamber and stuff? That was all inverted air. So it's like saying they spent enough time inverted on that boat that they went back in time basically, and then went through the machine again off screen, and now they're moving forward again.
Yeah, basically that's what it is, and it's too bad I would have replied to that comment there, but that's what it was. Is that because obviously the Robert Pattinson's character, he's always he's always from the future.
A ton of time in those things.
he needs to offshoot the present and then start moving forward to go along with the present. But once you're going along with the present, you can breathe the air. It's only when because it's not time travel. They're rewinding the tape. That's the only way. Yeah. So they have to be in this place or whatever, it's like a cylinder or whatever, to travel back into a moment in time, or if they're in actual space, in the actual environment, they can do the same thing and travel back in time. They just have to have a mask. But once they stop the tape and then they start moving forward with everybody else, they can take the mask off, which is why she doesn't need it, he doesn't need it whenever they're moving forward. Yeah. So I mean, it's just really clever. Who the hell would think of that? It's just the fact that he even said yeah, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try to have this make sense. Scientifically, there's something that is science, that because apparently there is a scientific thing that says that this might be possible in some sort of universe, kind of like the interstellar concepts. So he took that and ran with it, and was like, yeah, I can handle that. I'm smart enough to write a script that would actually make sense to some degree. It might not make sense completely, but I'll make it presentable. It's just, there's no other filmmaker on earth. If there was it's basically cool. He's the modern day Kubrick. He's as if Kubrick and Spielberg had a baby. He's the smartest Kubrick, but he makes blockbuster movies.
He just almost as accessible as Spielberg.
Yeah, it's crazy that he can think about that idea and it's yeah, I can do that. That's gonna make sense. Most people will just have a draft or two and say this just doesn't work. He found a way to make it work. And I'm sure that all those sequences, once you see them a second and third and fourth time, all of them make perfect sense because that fucker is so smart that he figured it all out somehow and he thought it all through. It's amazing. I really tip my hat off to him, but still, like we said, it doesn't mean that the movie is successful just because he's clever. But yeah, it's...
I mean, either way, you have to respect it.
He's on a different level,
and I do. I think that I really want to temper any of my negative comments about the film. I do respect the film. I do respect it. And again, like I said earlier, I wish there were more movies like it, and more people had the balls to do something like this. But yeah, I think that's where we can at least converge here.
Yeah.
So
good.